Hello, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745, and we're going to be playing some World Ablaze mod for Hearts of Iron 4. And of course, we're playing today as Germany, the evil guys, the nation that's going to set the world ablaze. One of them, not the only one, but one of them. All right. Well, we're getting into sort of. There's going to be some research bonuses here, some other research bonuses quickly. So I was looking at this last night before getting ready to play here. So I'm not going to rush into that. But what we have other things that we need to do here to improve. Well, just to sort of show you guys the template for the Austrian divisions, the current template for the German brigade. Used to be that the Alpine divisions were better than the German Gebirgs brigade, so, but not anymore. Now we can improve the design of the Gebirgs. Cannot change this template because that would have us exceed our special forces cap. How interesting, as seeing as how the special forces bit, because this is just artillery, this is just horse-drawn logistics, is going to be the same amount. Mountaineers. Yeah, okay. Okay, and this may have jumping over to the larger Austrian army. So we can't change that. Huh, okay, well, but here, let's go up to the top of this. We can look here that we're going to be changing this over to, well, we need trucks is what we don't have. Okay. Well, hold on. Let's go back to the top up here. Oh, I want. Okay. Just go through this in order. We're going to get the Austrian army here over to a more proper German infantry division instead of having a this one. Yes, we did. Okay. Yeah. Well. For all my wanting to do it orderly, I'm getting tired of those marching feet sounds. Okay, now these divisions here, how are they looking? Okay. Well, maybe I should come here at the bottom. Okay, at the bottom we need, well, just click here. Don't need to close this. All right. Template. Nope, nope, that's in good shape. Let's go to some of these that don't have the attrition. All right. So I guess that's not the mountain division part, but the rest. Hello, John Kench 2002. How you doing? Glad to have you here. All right. So we've upgraded some of the army here. Our logistics have gotten somewhat negative. We'll have to try to catch up with that in production. Okay, Continental Army, and that's where we're going to now catch up with some of that. Right, okay, we need some more artillery and heavy artillery and trucks. So, artillery would be up here. Well, don't want to start a new thing there, so let's do that. Now, okay. We got on switch, we're getting ready for here. We have time before that can happen. RG Farb and synthetic resources, that would be good, but I think... And Arno's here. Hello, my friend. How you doing today? I like that one tweet you highlighted of electric bikes. Yes, all bikes are not the future. Bikes are the past. They're good for kids riding around. Definitely, but we'll do fighters next. Long-range interceptors. Good to hear. I know I'm doing just fine. Alright, we want to send these guys over to East Prussia. We're going to give them to him. Okay, one division down to here, one division down to here, one division over to here. How are we doing out here? Okay, we just won against... Okay, let's attack that way now. Continue to improve Rommel's Panzer Leader capabilities. And you can assault the city with your Panzer Division. There we go. Now, it was suggested that maybe we should attack Madrid. I do know the most central bit of Madrid is pretty well fortified and there's probably somebody there. But what we are going to do is see if we can cut off, and that was also sort of the suggestion, cut off Madrid from the rest of Spain. Now, my understanding, which is not 100%, but it's reasonably good, I think, of the mechanics of Hoi 4 is that supply flows out of the capital, so if you cut the capital off from the rest, the capital is still in supply, it's the rest that are out of supply, except that there are local, certain cities and whatnot that do generate a certain amount of local supply. But it would definitely be best for us if we could cut off supply to everywhere else. And Toy Jet's here. Coming to see how I'm doing to be able to defeat me in next week's game. Long-range fighters, right. Okay, well, we're going to do the long-range fighters like we just did. And then I think... let's do this now that we have the bonus there. And do we have another good... We could do that, yeah. Get some better HE-111s in production. And hello, John Kretz. It's me, Mario. Okay. If there's something other than the sort of original, I don't get that, but whatever. Okay, so artillery support much better. Yeah, let's go with this. Get all those artillery units upgraded. Right, okay, now that we're basically organized, let's attack here. Hopefully Franco will want to join in our offensive here. Mountain infantry is improved, very nice. I think we'll wait on that, using that slot. Now let's... I was asked about several things, and sometimes I don't like typing lots and lots of text to answer things. I like talking about things. Now, one was planning ahead for national focus and not every time wandering around this chart. Well, okay. One, I've not played this before, and yes, I played World Ablaze before, but this changes over time, and I'm just not as organized up enough person that's going to chart everything out beforehand. Now, my friend Niagro, he does, he'll do an Excel spreadsheet and figure out how many days, whatever, probably here. I'm not that organized. And so some of these here we have, like there's 55 days out of 180 days, and we could do this. What might we fit in there for delay just a day or two and have like Form the Waffen SS or whatever? Not everything is well figured out in advance, and so yeah, we sort of have to go through and exploring it, and that's sort of what I'm doing here with you. And instead of either off camera, which again I haven't taken the time to do a lot of it off camera, or on camera to sit there and plot out how many days this national focus is going to take and how many days for that, and then what are the conditions needed, you know, either a date or how big of an army Germany has, or whatever that needs to be figured out to trip a national focus. Yeah, people, I'm just not that set up. Fear toy jet. And maybe if I was in Norway, I might fear him, but I don't know why I would fear him from here. I don't even think he knows where the Pacific Ocean is. All right, well. Oh, no, wrong guy. This guy, I think, yes. Yes. Right, okay, now, like I say, we have... I did play ahead a little bit, and we've now met all of the requirements here except for waiting 180 days, and we have just a few days here, but like, we can squeeze in forming the Waffen SS at only 14 days. Oh, and we can come over here now. if we need to do that one just yet. I think here's what we should do is get in better heavy weapons, and we can improve the production line earlier. And more military factories now. We finally caught up to, well, we're getting heavy weapons. Trucks is the big thing here. So let's come to our, go times 5 and add in another 5. There. Now we need more steel and more tungsten. So what we can do with that, let's hit there. Okay. Reactivate core steel mill. That's what we want to do. And we're still down the 4th International. Still down here, so that's no to 3 factories, bringing in tungsten. Norway and Netherlands will rule the world. Ha! They can't even rule themselves. Okay, now we can do the Sudetenland. That will get us some more factories and make us a few more enemies. How are we doing down here in our battle? Okay, we're getting some support here now from Franco's soldiers. Oh, we need to, I think, move more aircraft down into, come on. Yes. I keep forgetting about the aircraft situation. Maybe I should have sent some bombers down. I don't know. Tanks being sent to Ukraine. Well, does anybody else? The modern kind like leopards and challengers, yeah, I know. And I know you were, and this does very much pertain to what you're talking about. Does anybody else see a similarity that I see between Ukraine and Spain? I know it's not the same. Gamer, it's not the same. There's differences. Well, of course there's fucking differences. Spain is mountainous, and they speak Spanish, where Ukraine is flat, and they speak Ukrainian. It's not the same. But it is the same. I think Ukraine, or the Russian-Ukrainian war, is today's version of the Spanish Civil War. There's differences. There is a small, shall we say, active element of people from Ukrainian territory that consider themselves Russian that are on the Russian side. I have some Ukrainian friends, so, this isn't just, Russian propaganda, but some of the people in here, I think a significant number, maybe still a minority, but hell, 40% is a significant number in this map. See, I fucking hate the goddamn state mechanic. Yeah. See what you do, Arno, you get me off on tirades. Why do we have to have this damn state mechanic? Because we can't draw current Ukrainian boundaries because of the state mechanic here. And how stupid all this is. Right, but get back to Ukraine. So yeah, there are, and then there are sprinklings of people throughout Ukraine that at various points in time may have ancestry that they look back and see themselves as Russian. And as we see even before the Ukrainian Revolution of some while ago, I forget the exact dates, there were people in Ukraine that maybe thought themselves Ukrainian, but looked more to the east, Moscow, as their central focus as opposed to look towards Berlin or Paris as their sort of power block, economic block, whatever that they wanted to be a part of. And so, some divided. But so it isn't mostly a civil war, but there is an aspect of it. It is mostly an invasion. Now, Spain was mostly a civil war. And where you have similarities, yes, you have the very, very small German ground contingent, less than 300 people in combat, because their ground contingent was about 300 people for the army. The air support, they also had like airplane mechanics and other support personnel, but the air contingent was larger. About 3 divisions, roughly, of Italian army going in there. Otherwise, it's mostly, foreign volunteers on both sides coming into it like we see in Ukraine. But where we have similarities is everybody trying out their weapons on each other. We have, although, you will see Britain and France, I would say honestly, trying to blockade weapons coming in, but we see huge amounts of Soviet weaponry coming in, huge amounts of German weaponry coming in, and feeding the war on both sides. And we also see, including by the Italians and the Germans and the Soviets, which were, because there were a lot of, to my understanding, active Soviet pilots flying in the quote-unquote Republican Air Force. So that's the only place that I know of significant Soviet combat elements within the war. There were many secret police type, advisor type people running around, huge numbers of those, but all of them still wanting to keep the war contained. So maybe a German pilot shooting at a Soviet pilot over Spain, but peaceably getting along in some other parts of the world. We're not trying to, sink ships sending arms into Spain, in the North Sea or something else. So we're seeing this sort of contained. And yes, sending the modern tanks like Leopards and Challengers. Well, I think we've determined well enough, and I kept getting told, now not a huge number of times, but it was over many years, oh, they're just facing, it was just the Abrams and Challengers too, a little bit. We're just facing export models of the Russian tanks, Soviet tanks mostly, from the various eras, especially the first Gulf War second Gulf War, because the first Gulf War really is the Iran-Iraq War, as it was known also as that, but the first, the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, and then the massively international response to it. But those were just export versions. Oh, and they were just Iraqis that weren't trained really well. Well, we're seeing how bad even the Ukrainians aren't doing so well with ex-Soviet models, wherever, because even the Ukrainians produce tanks, I believe. Those tanks just aren't doing well. Those, you can't tell me those are all just export models. The Russians currently are just using their export models. No, they're not. Western tanks are far superior to, unlike what War Thunder wants to say. Russian tanks are, hey Ari, good to have you here. Russian tanks are nowhere equal to modern tanks. I'm thinking, and yes, I think about a lot of things here. An M60 tank versus a T-72, or even like a T-64, which T-64 would be a good comparison. Yeah, they're going to be more imbalance, more balance between them, but still. Again, unlike War Thunder, which we're going to be playing, which is tomorrow, I get off at 2, being home at 3, but still that's too late for any multiplayer to start. Are you saying next week or this week? Because we're not doing it this week, obviously, because we're doing this. Pleased to find that. Are we having a problem next week or... Oh, this day, today. Okay, no problem. Larry, no problem. Is crew comfort, and it's not just how relaxed you are, how comfy the seats are in the tank, but how well can you see out of the tank? How well can you how quickly, gun depression, and how quickly you can load the tank and whatnot. And yeah, I know the Soviets had autoloaders, but if you look at how those autoloaders work, they're damn slow. So Soviet-based, and I'm using these terms I think correctly, Soviet-based, which of course is what the Russians. The only thing modern, and we haven't seen any in the combat, and they have so few of them, the Armata tank, that really just sort of, I was going to say prototypes. No, I think more field trials tank, meaning they've field in the fields. It's beyond a prototype, but it's field trial. Everything else is Soviet era based. I mean, there's been some improvements, I believe, over time post-Soviet, but models of tanks just aren't that good. And for all of those people out there who were trying to go, oh, the tank is dead, and I don't know whether that was started in just after World War I or what, how far back that goes. But there's been a lot of people that the tank is dead, for many years, and a lot of people who are as much armchair generals as myself, meaning like politicians that have never served in the military or something. And I don't know, and some of them, including like Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, wanting to get away from the tank. Why, if the tank is so dead, why does Ukraine want them so badly? Riddle me that, people. Anybody who thinks the tank is dead is useless. Riddle me that. Why does Ukraine want them so badly? Now, we can see, I think, and that's partially, shall we say, the video evidence that's at least making it to me, is that artillery, because of what we really haven't had before, well, we just hadn't seen it so much before. I think we've had it in the Iraq invasion war as well, but we're continuing it into here, is the combination of real-time enemy aerial spotting. The U.S. Army does a bunch of it. I don't know that they're doing it. I don't believe in talking to current serving members. I don't think they do it well enough. I would every platoon I would have a recon drone or one or more recon drones for every platoon. Little small backpack things, small things. Everyone, but through various means and with not necessarily precision guided ammunition, which we've had for a while and we're still using, but precision aiming systems, that are based off of the GPS. All you got to do is kill the GPS. You're going to kill most of those precision aiming capabilities, people. Just remember that. And again, why it's sort of like Spain, in that the Russians aren't shooting down our satellites that are flying over Ukraine. Now, they may be also getting the same GPS information and using it themselves, too. But watching some film footage of a fairly straight trench line that looked to be, and it was, from top down, so I'm not quite sure, people were laying in it, but looked to be just like 2 or 3 feet deep. Not very deep. That I don't know how many of those were just people huddled down in, soldiers huddled down in that trench line, or were bodies at that point. But artillery being precise enough that where in the Vietnam War, they would know where the trench was in generally good position, but unable to precisely hit right into the trench. In a 2 or 3 foot trench, if you just get just far enough, and I'm not going to, it can vary whether it's a air burst or ground burst or whatever, but just far enough away from it, you're more or less okay from that artillery barrage. I'm not talking about deep dugouts or deep, bunkers. I'm just talking about a slit trench dug in the earth that's long, that you could crawl 100 yards in or more, or meters for you Europeans. We're being targeted precisely enough that trench was no longer no longer function protectively. It's just too precision of attacks, and we're seeing that with artillery everywhere that at least the Ukrainians are able to use and are able to real time see just where the enemy is and get GPS feedbacks of those exact locations and precisely put rounds onto those targets. I do believe it's like a television camera that may be showing you exactly the spot in front of the television camera, but you have no idea of what's happening behind the television camera, if you know what I mean. In whether in a television studio or looking around in the world, like a travel video. Come see beautiful Romania, and they show you, a nice video of a beautiful church or something like that. Well, on the other side, you turn the camera around, it may be just a garbage pile. You don't know what's on the other side of the camera. So we're seeing what's being videoed, and we're seeing what's using precise ammunition and precise hits, and with this literally the overall scale of the size of the war, that may be just a few hot spots, shall we say, that we're looking at with the camera, but we're seeing very effective artillery use by the Ukrainians, but they want tanks. Modern Western tanks. Russia, and so does that. So, and the Ukrainians seem to be keeping much of their modern Western equipment. Things like the Panzerhaubützen 2000, keeping them functional. So whatever, fixing broken things on them, keeping them operated, they seem to. They're not going to tell me if they've gotten 12 of them and 5 of them are out of service because not because of enemy action, just because they broke and they haven't fixed them. They're not going to tell me that. Obviously, but so we don't quite know, and they're gonna, warfare, you're gonna try to hide that out. So we don't know how well, but they seem to be dealing with a lot of the maintenance needs of Western equipment reasonably well, and they seem, there still seems from some videos that are fairly recent, as in the last few months, just before winter sort of set in, at least one of them I'm thinking of units bumping into each other accidentally from the different sides and having engagements, literally driving down the road and driving into each other, which sort of dash cam footage of that, or GoPro footage of one of those engagements I saw, which is clearly, the Ukrainians weren't all dug in, or in a ambush, or even just in a quick, hasty ambush thing. They were driving down the road, and here comes a bunch of Russian trucks driving at them, and they start shooting them up. And you don't just keep driving down the road, even if you know that there's Russian trucks. Oh, they don't know we're here. No, if you know they were here, you get off and you quickly set up an ambush for them, and so it was definitely a confusion battle. So I don't know that they're going to use our tanks, the Western tanks, as well as the West would use them, but they would seem to use them okay. I know this is a longer thing, and I'll get to Aries' text here in a bit, longer than maybe Arno was trying to say. I don't think anybody that's in a position of leadership in this war, and by that I mean on the Russian side, on the Ukrainian side, on various Western powers. Any of these people in leadership has in my opinion, a realistic end game for this war. And that scares me. It scares the shit out of me. Because we're seeing national levels of incompetence. Now, maybe they do and they're just not telling me. Hello, Dennis, the Fallen King. You've gotten me in the middle of a rant, so I'm not playing, and it's all Arno's fault. I think a lot of the Western powers believe that they can somehow topple Putin, and that's become the goal, is toppling Putin, which, not a problem, just got me ranting on Ukraine and whatnot. I don't think Putin, things can change, trust me. In politics, things can change. But at this point, I see the Western goal of, we've got to punish Putin's aggression, and is their viewpoint and as their goal. And they're going to, by bleeding him white and economically isolating Russia, they're just going to topple Putin. I don't think that that's a realistic goal. I don't think Ukraine's government's goal of a reconquista of all of Ukrainian territory, at least all of it, as of, year 2000 or something, meaning all of Crimea and all of the, the Donbass or whatever. And, good luck to them if they can, great, but they fucking can't unless the West supports them in that. Because if right now the big thing is, and I will get back to Crisis Report pretty soon, it's a lot of work in keeping it up. Is the story that I want to talk about is the logistics of this war, which is not very sexy, and I don't know that the viewers there want that. But the biggest talks and everything I see is 155 millimeter shells, and all the manufacturers are ramping up more production, partially for Ukraine, but partially for other nations, realizing they need bigger stockpiles of these things. That Ukraine can only fight as long as, again, like Spain, as long as outside sources are dumping in munitions. So really, and I'm not as a superpower, Russia won't let that slide. Well, Russia is not a superpower. The Soviet Union was. Russia is not a superpower. Russia is a great power. China is a great power. There is only one superpower left, and that is the United States. Russia is a great power, but it is no longer a superpower. It just, because it has retreated entirely from this part of the world, in which really you see Venezuela supporting Castro's Cuba and some of the other sort of leftist governments in Central America, where Putin is no longer. You see Russia has entirely pulled out of its support of Vietnam. It's withdrawn from Cam Ranh Bay, which it had had a naval base there, and Cameron Bay may be turning back into a U.S. naval base. The thing that the North Vietnamese and then the Vietnamese Communist Party wanted to stop before, and they're going, hey, U.S., we have this nice Cameron Bay here. Could be a nice naval base for you. Think about it. So Russia is no longer a superpower. Russia is a great power, but it's no longer a superpower. Those are just their one sort of overseas thing is sort of Syria, and that's it, basically. It's retreated out of most of Africa. in a practical sense. So, I've talked about this before. A buddy of Goering's, and I forget the guy's name, got the sort of contracts and set up with Germany to smuggle weapons, but mostly munitions, mostly things that go out of a gun. Whether it's an artillery piece or a rifle or a machine gun, things that get projected out of it. Eventually, he got 3 ships that were smuggling munitions primarily into Spain, and that the Germans, they would load them in Germany and they'd smuggle them in. And the German force Navy, the Kriegsmarine, was part of the patrols to keep weapons and stuff to be from smuggling into Spain, who were part of it. Forget which ship, but one of their ships, the Admiral Scherer or something, I forget. One of them got bombed by Republican forces because it was part of the sort of blockade, the international blockading force. Now, of course, this was very helpful because the Germans were part of it, so they knew where all the ships were sailing, patrolling, so they could tell their smugglers where and when to approach, and what to see and what not to see from their own vessels. That they were bringing in 3. There were 3 ships, merchant vessels that were constantly going back and forth between Germany and nationalist Spain. This was going so well. Goering and this guy bought 3 more ships that were going back and forth from Germany to Republican Spain, selling German munitions to the Republicans. So Goering was supplying both sides about equally, in that with 3 ships going back and forth. The Soviets were also dumping in, all the huge amounts of weapons and munitions to the Republicans. So yeah, it was going so much that they were supplying both sides. Keeping the war going longer, people, meaning more deaths were happening. More deaths on the battlefield, more deaths because of, there was starvation going on in Spain because crops were failing because everyone is out being a soldier, or the needed to get crops from wherever to whatever city wasn't happening because, again, everyone was being a soldier, or the combat lines were disrupting it. People were dying. Civilians were dying because of the Spanish Civil War, and because not just Germany supplying both sides, but because both sides were being, money. Well, they were making money off of it. And I'm not making this up, people. I know I'm just going off memory, but it's been in the last year I read it. There's a whole series of articles talking about it. And the way the nationalists were paying for the munitions was with raw materials, things like tungsten. Germany had a whole crew that would come into, as they captured new factories or new major industrial centers, come in to figure out. I think it was Harpo or whatever the initials for it were coming in and figuring out how best they could serve Germany. And it got to the point that because Germany was getting such a good deal on for these raw materials, meaning because they'd figure a Reichsmark or a dollar or whatever, it was valued at. And Franco eventually realizes, look, you're getting this stuff as a discount. We want to be able to sell it on the international market. We'll get more for it, and we'll be able to buy more of your munitions. And the German response was, well, you could do that if you want. But if you don't sell us these raw materials at the price we say, we're no longer going to send in munitions into you. And who else are you going to find out in the world, somewhere in the world, that's willing to even sell you munitions at any price? Not just at the, at a highly inflated price that Germany was selling them to you in. And Franco goes, oh, sorry. Yeah, keep the deal. So that's, sort of thinking like, Biden, and we'll send you money to Ukraine so long as you send some of that money back to us. Right, Ukraine? So, yeah, money. Again, another way Ukraine is like the Spanish Civil War. And so by sending in munitions to both sides, you keep the war going longer, so you have more and more deaths and more destructions. So instead of just like supplying the one side and having it victorious, you keep supplying the other side as well, so the war progresses longer. In my opinion, Ukraine can fight for, just as many days as the West sends munitions. Because if it just gets back to whatever it can make on its own, AK-47 ammunition, I'm sure they have a factory. If it hasn't been blown up, they're making it, because I know in the past there was at least one significant, small munition, bullets manufacturing in Ukraine, going back to the old Soviet days. I think it's still there. That ain't going to stop the Russians, okay? Just AK-47 ammunition isn't going to stop the Russians. They need all of these NLAWs and javelins and whatnot to stop the Russians. So the moment they stop getting fed 155 millimeter shells, because whatever they can make internally, either 155 or 122 millimeter shells, that ain't going to stop the Russians. So the moment the munitions stop coming into Ukraine, the Russians stop having the ability to, that's not the Russian, the Ukrainians stop having the ability to fight the war. So if you don't think the Ukrainians are Western puppets, you're entirely wrong, because they are 100% dependent upon money to pay for it, because somebody has to get paid. Because none of the factories that are making I'm not talking about inside of Ukraine. I'm talking about everywhere else. None of these factories, they all got to get paid. None of them make munitions for free. So somebody's got to get paid. And yes, somebody's going to be making money off that war. So the minute the money and the munitions dry up, because they both could dry up, or just one of them dries up, meaning if they're still going to have a lot of money but no one's willing to sell the munitions. The international arms trade is highly regulated, people. Yes, I used to work in it many years ago. Highly regulated. So Ukraine is a puppet. Russia, I don't think, is ready, or Putin's government, shall we say, isn't ready to collapse. Putin doesn't have the ability to, in my opinion, to defeat Ukraine, so long as the West puts in munitions. And all these people that go out there, and I see polls for and against, and people pushing out, and I know this is taking a long time, sorry people. Recently, just saw one today. So many people want peace in Ukraine. Well, I think everybody wants peace in Ukraine. The Russians want it, the Ukrainians want it, the rest of the world wants it. But the conditions of what the peace will look like, that is sort of the rub. Oh, and don't think these arms munition manufacturers, I know there's a trope going back to post-World War I, that the arms munitions manufacturers are getting rich, so they want the war to go on. Nope. They don't need the war to go on. They just need this war to have happened, and then Hungary, Slovakia, Czechia, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, Sweden, Germany, Israel, India, they're all going to continue building up stockpiles of artillery shells because they've seen how much they needed them in Ukraine. They see how quickly they're used up on the battlefield. They see that whether it's international production or their domestic production, depending on the country we're talking about, they can never make enough artillery shells to feed the guns, because those guns can fire faster than you can make artillery shells. So they're going to have to stockpile. Now, they can't stockpile up in a single year, partially because production can't produce that many, partially national budgets aren't that big. But they're all watching, they're all seeing that they need to massively stockpile. I remember back, I think it is in the late 80s or something, seeing some report about how some of the Arab-Israeli wars, the only reason Israel was able to keep fighting was American jets, were, big cargo jets, were landing somewhere in Israel, offloading pallets of ammunition, artillery ammunition for Israel. So whatever Israel was able to stockpile, they quickly went through. Whether this doesn't matter which the Yom Kippur War, that doesn't matter. It just matters that Israel, whatever they had stockpiled, was nowhere near enough, and the U.S. was landing munitions to keep Israel fighting, defending itself, or aggressively attacking, whatever, it doesn't matter. And they were feeding off of U.S. stockpiles. Everybody's seeing that with Ukraine, and munitions companies make more money off the threats of war than actual war. So they don't need the war. They just need the war lesson. So, okay, see you later. I'll read your stuff. I know you didn't get to it while you were still here, Ari, but thanks for posting. Thanks for hanging out. Hope everything goes well next week so we can all play. So I don't see a good end result. I don't see Western leaders that. Why aren't they coming out and saying, "Hey, we're willing to negotiate with Putin"? Not we're willing to give in to Putin's demand for territory. No, let's negotiate. No, they just see punish Putin. That's all I'm hearing out of them. And yes, they may be privately, secretly saying other things. That happens. I know it. But they also need to publicly state it because, hello, Turnlow, because eventually the Russian people will hear it. And if it's been 6 months or 6 years of Western leaders saying, well, we'll stop this war if Putin just negotiates, and here's our initial set of demands, they'll eventually go, oh, we can stop the war if we just negotiate it. Might not be everything we or Putin wants, but it would be, we could get something out of this. And Ukraine can go, well, yeah, okay, we might lose a bit of, a few provinces in the Hoi 4 terms. They might lose Mariupol. But how many Ukrainian dead are worth Mariupol? Already many have died, So I'm, at some point, if you can get a settlement, what settlement? I'm not saying everything that Russia currently occupies you should give up on. I'm not saying that. But I'm also not saying you should, we'll only talk once we've taken back Crimea. There has to be an intermediate point. So, tanks, they ain't a dead thing. I don't think the Ukraine war will escalate outside of the theater. I don't think they're going to bring great conquests to the Ukrainian side of things. But we'll see. All right. Well, we're going to continue this live here, but this is the end of the episode. Thank you for listening to my thoughts on Ukraine and what's going on and how it is, I do think, very, very similar to Spain, the Spanish Civil War.